trouble now.
Yeah, well, it's hard not to be in trouble around this topic.
Yeah.
You're in trouble
Or
either
any
way.
topic, really, these days.
It's so true. It's so true. If you guys spend any time on Twitter at all, it's just like one giant argument. It's like war of the sexes playing out on Twitter all the time.
Yeah.
Women do this, men do that.
That's true. That is like that on Twitter.
Yeah, there's a difference between men and women.
Oh yeah?
I've been
What's
trying
that?
to tell everybody this.
Don't be saying that. You're not allowed to say that, Benjamin.
No, women are shorter and slower to react to assassination attempts.
Is that's the biological
I demand
difference?
evidence of that.
Hey,
I
listen,
demand
if you all
Wasn't
want
there just
Leah Thomas out of women's sports, then get the women out of the USSS. Tit for tat. Well,
Are there no roles? Are there no roles for women in the Secret Service? I don't know. What
maybe
is the Secret
dispatch?
Service? It's not just bodyguarding, is it? Dispatch.
They can have administration. Women are really capable organizers. My mom is a great bureaucratic organizer.
Oh my God, women are so good at organizing and multitasking. It is insane.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you want speedy reaction times, like throwing themselves onto a grenade, you're not going to get that. You're not going to have that same sort of honed, self-sacrificing mentality. You're just not going to have it.
You think so?
Because no, they are. We see our chickens. We've been meaning to talk about this. We see the chicken hens, right? And they have their whole psychology is about being hyper neurotic, and then taking care of themselves, which is where all the birds are. They take care of like all their little chicks, right? Like that.
Yeah.
I've had an awful thought.
Okay.
Should the Secret Service women bring their children along when they're protecting the
I think they're
president?
programmed. They have the eggs inside of them. They got to protect the eggs. They got to protect the eggs, or else humanity ends if the women don't act in a certain way, and humanity ends if men don't act in a certain way.
Well, welcome to Monday, July 15th, Solid Ground live stream. We are delighted to have the charming Benjamin Boyce with us today to talk about the Trump incident.
Oh,
which is we use that title, but when we came up with that, Deborah came up with that, she said that's going to get us in trouble because it's either not giving it enough attention, not giving it enough gravity, or it's giving it, I don't know, it's just one of these things. It's like a tripwire. Any talking about this, you trip over people's polarity on this issue. So, but it is a really important issue. It's a really important event that happened. It's huge. So maybe we should talk. Yeah, I knew you were going to do that.
Well, you should have done it then.
Well, your impression is better because, some
That's
things
not
men are
like
better at.
Yeah.
Like impersonating other men.
Maybe. Can you do your, does anybody here do the Kamala cackle? Can anybody do the?
No.
I'd have to practice. I could probably come up with it at some point.
You have practice though.
I was in Oklahoma once, and there was a character with a horrible laugh, and so I had this very awful laugh that would people the
turned
audience
out to be the exact same as Kamala's.
No, it's not quite, but I'm capable of having a very awful cackle of some sort.
Fun in the bun.
Well, Deborah, do you want to read? You want to tell people who we are for people who are just joining now? Solid Ground.
Solid Ground is a peer support community for anyone concerned about the imposition of critical social justice and/or other authoritarian measures such as COVID mandates in their workplace, university, children's school, or community. We offer weekly online peer support groups in which members share ideas, thoughts, and support for how to navigate the impact of these ideologies and policies and answer the question, where do we go from here? You can join one of our groups for only $5 a month. To find out how to join our community, please visit solidgroundsupport.com. And please note, Solid Ground does not provide psychotherapy or legal advice, and nothing we do should be construed as such.
And thanks very much, Deborah. I know we're going to talk about something specific, but just on this topic, we had a comment. What was it? A week or two ago, maybe it was last week's Solid Ground, we got this comment that said, sorry, are you equating gender ideology and COVID mandates? Seriously? And and they also had some other comments about our show last week. It says also the format with 3 women staring at their computers while people talk off-screen talk for an hour. It's like those reaction videos where you watch some person you've never seen before react to a song they've never heard before and smile or look surprised. Okay, but why? And so on that note, maybe we can talk about why would we have a group where we talk about things as seemingly disparate as gender ideology and COVID mandates. I don't know if somebody wants to take that one on, but just to address the other thing, it was a little awkward last week's stream. I must have had a Zoom setting that only shows people who have their cameras on. And I didn't realize it because when we were looking at the screen, we could see the little icons that the 2 guests put up, but they both chose to remain off camera, and they talked about why. But afterwards, it was a little funny looking at us with disembodied voices talking. And so thank you for bearing with us. If you were, that was your first stream, that was a little different. We don't usually have guests that don't show their faces on camera, but we're fine with that if people want to talk about something and they just feel like that would be more comfortable for them. So it's not something we'll rule out in the future. We might have that again. I'll try to make sure that it's a little bit less awkward looking though. So thank you to everybody for bearing with us. And does anybody want to take on why we have gender ideology and COVID mandates both supported in our groups?
Because
Supported?
it's both.
Well, support for people around those ideas that seem disparate to some people.
Oh, okay. Support people who are critical of those issues. Okay.
Correct. Because even though it's different issues, of course it's different issues, it's still somebody attempting to impose in a very authoritarian way without tolerance for different opinions and different approaches. And so that's one of the things that we do at Solid Ground is offer support and hopefully some nuanced, intelligent conversations about issues like that have become extremely difficult to talk about in society without fear of being canceled or having some form of, social or economic consequence. That's why we address both issues as well as other issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And some people still do see them as very different substantively, but the process that people are undergoing in response to these authoritarian ideologies and policies can feel the same or feel very similar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So where were you when you heard the news about Trump?
What news?
What news? What's
Is
the
there
news?
new news?
Is there
what is the
news?
news?
What happened?
What's the word on the street? Well, where you were. I was on my little battle box. It's charging in the next room. And I'm gonna unmirror my video because okay, there we go. That's better. And yeah, and then I ran in. I'm like, Leslie! And you were like face deep into facial reconstruction surgery that you perform on yourself every time we go out in public. And because you can't just walk around with an icon of yourself. You have to
actually go put your face on.
Put your face on. You're like, I can't hear you. You're listening to some Jewish podcast or another, taking down Moloch or some sort of mystical podcast thing that you're listening to. Yeah, okay. And then eventually I told you. And you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You got shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought you were telling me he'd been killed. I was, and that was like, I don't know. I didn't have long enough to sit with that feeling to see how that would have fleshed out, because quickly I learned that wasn't the case, which was great. But oh, what a terrible thing. And yeah, it seems like it's the only thing anybody online can talk about for the last few days, which, I mean, it's fitting. It's a presidential assassination attempt, or a former presidential candidate. And a lot of people have a lot of strong feelings after seeing this. I think it's moved people's feelings about the race and the candidate himself. So I don't know. What are your thoughts? Who has a thought on that? Benjamin does.
Well, I'm wondering what, because we spoke about this a little bit. What do these ladies think?
Mhm.
Does this change the landscape for you? Does it change your attitude towards speaking your political opinions? Because I think that might be one of the bigger.
100% no.
I think there'll be a lot more MAGA
No.
caps being brought out of people's trunks.
I
Yeah,
actually
I
saw it.
think
Oh, go ahead,
so.
Jen.
No, I think for some people it raises a feeling of sympathy for him. But no, it doesn't change my feeling about expressing my opinions. What it does, I think, is provide a really stark and unpleasant illustration of just how chaotic everything is right now, and how I do think that part of this is the demonization of Trump. Everybody's saying, the mainstream media saying this will be the end of democracy, and this a lot of what I interpret to be hyperbole and just sometimes completely 100% unfair criticism has really amped up some people to the point where this happened. And I think that sometimes this rhetoric can get really dangerous. And I don't think we're in for a very pleasant election cycle at all, to put it mildly.
Really? Will it be anything like 2020 though? I mean, will cities burn?
I think that 2020 was unique because of the unfortunate incident with George Floyd and the fact that everybody was on lockdown with COVID. I feel like there was a perfect storm going on, and that contributed to things getting into that state with the mainly peaceful protests. So I'm going to say that I really hope that it's not going to get to that state, but I don't know. I could see people going pretty ballistic if there's a Trump win. I could see riots. I mean, I live right outside Washington, D.C. too. So let's just say that I will not be going into D.C. for a little while after that.
Deborah?
I have so many thoughts. First, on your question about the hats coming out, I did see on Twitter, and I don't know if someone said this and it was true or not, but they said they were in San Francisco and they saw more people walking around wearing MAGA hats. And I thought that was interesting in terms of people coming out. What triggered in me was all my depolarization tendencies, and so I was like, okay, I want to get Braver Angels stuff out here. I want to get my, how contempt destroys democracy things, and watching my impulse to do that, and then starting to realize like some people might just be like, fuck you, with that, so what's interesting to watch is, it just didn't happen to me at all. It didn't, some people were extremely inspired, and I can understand it intellectually, by watching Trump having taken that, standing up, fight, just moving on, and all of that. And I understand how that could be inspiring. It didn't do that to me at all. And so I'm just sort of sitting here like, have I just been in a different tribe that doesn't move me? I wasn't cynical about it, but I just was like, oh, am I in just a different category or something like that? Because I'm seeing people really feeling super inspired and like happy about that and uplifted. And that, that wasn't for me, although I have not been a Trump voter. That's not been my side of the aisle necessarily. But I see that. I do see some people trying to cool things down. Like I'm seeing at least public figures, whether they can actually do it or not. I think the Dems are stuck in this thing of like, well, if our only ammunition is saying that he's a threat to democracy and he's existential, but now we can't really say it because someone tried to kill him. Like, what do we say? They're kind of in a weird Morning Joe. I don't know if you saw, like, they're not even airing this week. I think apparently because they were afraid they might say something that would just be too incendiary. So they're not even on, the show isn't even on this week.
They should speak. They should go for it.
So it's very, I don't know. I'm just kind of observing it, and I don't know if it could get worse. I mean, it could get worse. I can't tell whether people are capable of going, wait a minute, let's chill out, or if it's going to build up. What I like seeing is someone like James Lindsay and whoever else who has been saying for months to the right, you people have got to not be violent. I mean, I just, I don't know how many people.
Though. When have they?
Well, back, you could say January 6th maybe or something. Like maybe that's what you could say.
Okay.
But I do see, it seems like whether he's having the effect or not, I like that that's the messaging. And that somehow there's been restraint, it appears to me, on that side.
No, I think conservatives are constitutionally against violence and revolution. They want to.
Yeah, but you've got militias. I mean, you've got not many. There's probably little 5 of them somewhere.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
What?
Are conservatives against violence? I'm gonna just go
on
ahead
American soil.
What thing? No, sorry.
And I say constitutionally,
But I do think that January 6th, though, that's interesting. I guess we've talked a little bit about that in the past. I don't think I mentioned this. I was involved in a lot of community building around the COVID lockdowns here locally in Western Washington. There were a lot of people who were really upset with the isolation that was being imposed on us, having our ability to congregate, our ability to get our kids together threatened. And so we had this really wonderful community that grew out of that. And I still have a lot of friends from that time, and I'm still connected to people from then. There were a lot of conservatives in that group, that group of people, those skeptics of the lockdowns. I never considered myself conservative. I still don't. I consider myself rather centrist at this point, but always had seen myself as more progressive and on the left. But in this group of people, there were a lot of people who talked about going to the January 6th event, the rally. There was like, there's going to be we're all going to go. People were very inspired by what they'd seen in the truckers in Canada, wanted a similar reckoning on American soil. And you saw that the truckers, that wasn't a violent thing. That was a bunch of people coming together and like celebrating their I guess their patriotism, their humanity, pushing back against government policy, but in a really beautiful way. And this was the spirit with which these people were heading to Washington. And so I don't know. I know as much as most people who haven't spent a lot of time dissecting the issue about January 6th, about what happened. But I know that the way it's been promoted doesn't match the spirit with which a lot of people were going.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that represented conservative violence, although it has been used that way. Yeah. It has been used to represent that.
The left has a monopoly on violence. Sorry, Deborah.
Well, the left would say it's okay to be violent. I mean, that's
yeah.
Let's just be, let's decolonize and in any means necessary. And so, yeah, they don't kind of make bones about it, at least on the far end of things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the right is not necessarily talking about unless you've got, again, like a few people off somewhere or in their little militia somewhere, but they're not even doing anything.
No, and yeah, the left, whatever that means, whoever controls the narrative controls who gets to be violent and why. And, we saw Kamala in 2020 saying these riots are not going to stop. They're not going to stop. This violence is not going to stop. To Stephen Colbert, have you seen that little clip? And he's like, don't say that, he's kind of looking in horror because he knows that the optics and stuff they trend in one direction. So how do you upset that machine? And what we've seen in the last 2 weeks with that debate, if we can call it a debate between Trump and Biden, for whatever reason, they couldn't lie about Biden anymore. They suddenly had to reckon with his behavior, even though there have been clips all the way up until that moment. And I don't know why it was then that they all kind of came down.
Right. It's nothing new.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's nothing new at all.
It's nothing new. It's like, where were all these people that are amazed by it? Where the heck have they been? He's been demonstrating these signs of decline for, oh my gosh, I mean, years and years now. So I don't really get the shock.
There's certain things that break through that messaging apparatus and that Trump photo opportunity that was an assassination. He says something cool. He was interviewed on the New York Post. He said, "That's it's an iconic image. Usually you have to die to get in an image like that, you know, which is kind of true, you know, and yet glib at the same time. So there, that image has a way of breaking through the messaging machine. I don't know if it's going to reach certain demographics who are so attuned to, let's just say, CNN, MSNBC. Like there's this great large boomer population that are just keyed into Trump is a convicted felon and we can't have him. He's an existential threat to democracy. So we need to make sure people can't vote for him. You know, they don't necessarily say that, but that's what's going on in the whole TDS or the Trump derangement syndrome. How do you break through that? I don't know if you can reach them, but I think that the system is so rickety right now. The messaging apparatus is so rickety right now that they have to, we see them scrambling and trying to shift. And with Biden coming out yesterday and saying, we have to stop this rhetoric. He had we watched it. We were making fun of it earlier. He had like a 6-minute teleprompter speech that he couldn't really get through without making mistakes every minute or so. You know, he called the ballot box, the battle box, the battle box. He almost said, "Make America Great Again." And he tried to stop himself because that was what was going to come out. But when he talked about political violence, he tried to bring up all these incidents and spread it all around, spread it all around. And then, and then the Trump assassination. He was talking about all these different, like the kidnapping of a governor, which was actually an FBI plot or something like that. You know, or, you know, this thing happened to this person, this thing happened to this person. Because he can't just say, he can't rail against ultra MAGA for 3.5 years, you know, and stand in these terrible photo ops about how he's a threat to democracy, and then say, well, it's we got to tone down the rhetoric. We got to tone down the rhetoric. I don't know to what extent that floats. So it really depends on how much that interrupts people's cognitive dissonance to such a degree where they kind of wake up. But it might allow people who are skeptical, who have already woken up, but who didn't, because of, you know, didn't want to get yelled at or didn't want to be, you know, shouted down in polite society. They didn't want to cross this line and be openly for Trump. I think that this moment allows people to say, you know, if he's going to take a bullet for me, then I'm going to wear a hat for him, you know? And there's that little nudge. So then there's a preference cascade, I think it's called, where the data builds up to such a degree that now it's just, okay, it's just going to be a cascade of people saying, you know, I'm for Trump. You know, this has got to end. And I don't know exactly what that means. Like, am I for all these policies or whatever? But I know he's not a fascist. And he showed true grit. He punched through the messaging. He punched through the hypnosis. He punched through that mass formation psychosis, whatever it is. And he allows that moment of him pumping his fist in the air and saying, fight, 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 which it's interesting, Deborah, that you didn't have that strong of a reaction to. It's interesting that I have a really strong reaction to it. I get chills thinking about that. It's just so awesome to me. I think that
and that's what I get that it's got a strong emotional impact on me. That's why I'm sitting here going, like, I'm not having it, but I totally believe it is deeply impacting people.
Yep. You know, and it's interesting to hear both of you talk about that, because I feel like I can see both. I have both of those. I feel myself having that reaction. Like I said, when I thought the first time when Benjamin said Trump's been shot, and I was like, oh my God, was he killed? What happened? And it's like, no, he's okay. And then you see the clip of him getting up to his feet, and then, you know, blood on his face, that vulnerability, but still the strength there. I felt very moved by that. I felt really moved by it. But at the same time, aware that this is kind of an emotional, there's an emotional thing happening here that can have a lot of ability to sway reason. And so I'm ambivalent on Trump. I'm not a Trump hater. I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm just a person who sees a politician. I've kind of lost a lot of faith in presidential politics. I voted for him last time, but I wouldn't call myself a Trump supporter. If this is the lay of the land, I'll be voting for him again. It's not that I'm not going to wear his shirt, and I'm not going to tell people that he's the greatest politician that's ever lived. He's a guy who has some good policies and some bad ones. And, you know, whatever. We could really talk about what we think about the human being, and that would be, you know, that's a whole nother conversation. But I felt the power of that emotional appeal, I guess. It's not a manipulation necessarily, because it's not intended to evoke something out of you, but it does evoke something. And I can feel myself being, you know, in that moment, watching that and watching my own response to that, I thought, this is going to move a lot of people. This is going to have this effect on a lot of people. I can feel it in me. And I think that when you talked about the cognitive dissonance, and Ninja Kitty in the chat says TDS cannot be reached. My mom has a terminal case. And, you know, maybe not, but that breaking through the cognitive dissonance, when all the messaging is, this guy is evil, he is evil incarnate, he's terrible, why would you want this totally crooked, corrupt guy? And you have the rhetoric around that is quite violent, that is inciting violence oftentimes from the people who are really anti-Trump.
Yeah. When
these people see this come to fruition in an actual act of violence, I think a lot of good people are going to check themselves and go, oh my gosh. And, you know, for instance, what would you guys think if the tables were turned? What would be your emotional gut response if everything was the same, but it was Biden that this had happened to?
Yeah.
And you see this feeble old man that a lot of people have been really disgusted. Like, how can you put this guy up? He's the Walking Dead. How can we have this guy up on the stage? He's clearly not running the show. I mean, the rhetoric hasn't been violent necessarily toward him, but it's been really dismissive of his capacity. But if there were an actual attempt on his life, I think that we would feel ourselves have a giant welling of sympathy for this person. And so I just wonder what, if, you know, running that thought experiment, what that would look like had the tables been turned.
Now I want to jump in just because I'm still sitting like with my reaction. I think part of it, and it's so interesting when you think about what do you first see, or how does a narrative get framed first? What happened for me was a friend sent me that iconic photo, and I didn't know it was a real situation. So I thought it was a meme. And then I thought, oh, Jesus, like, I can't believe he's staging this. It looks like Iwo Jima. Come on.
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
and I had a hard time. Like, it still hasn't hit me that it was real, because that's the first thing went in, and then it just had this whole frame of that looks fake. And so that's, I think, maybe one of the reasons why it's not hitting me as much. If I had just seen the raw, like the shooting, his reactions, and I had not seen that image just going around, I might have responded differently, just thinking that. But I didn't really answer your question, Leslie.
No, it's okay. I mean, it's in a way, if you just step outside of it, which I guess we are outside of it, but if you just take a look at it, it's a really perfect piece of campaign material for.
No, this is historic.
It couldn't be better.
100%.
So I had this, we were out with friends that night. We went out to a dinner party, and I was kind of joking that, like, you know, there's no way, of course, there's no way Trump's people would have put this on. It was, I know that. I'm not
really.
I'm not saying that, but I was making a joke about how, like, all of his staffers have like a bandaged ear because they've been aiming for just the ear all week. You know, it's just like, it's so close. It's like you graze him, but you don't kill him, and then you leave him really strong and also vulnerable. And it messaging wise, it positions him very well.
And by the way, that's going around. So now I couldn't believe this was in the Washington Post. Taylor Lorenz wrote a piece about BlueAnon. And so Taylor Lorenz is actually writing about the conspiracies on the blue side. And this idea of it was staged and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, oh my God, that made it into the Washington Post. And Taylor Lorenz is writing about
Taylor is
theories?
the epitome of the millennial journo. Like, she goes around and doxes people, and then she cries when she's doxed. You know, she's a total Nepo baby who hides her age on Wikipedia, and she makes videos about how the corrupt media is all a bunch of Nepo babies, right? And, you know, she won some points against, I can never say it, Lib's a TikTok lady. They had like a sit down, and they were both kind of like this total millennial, like I can't even watch it, but like Rhea turned out to be not as smart in that conversation as Taylor Lorenz. But anyway, so Blue Anon is like QAnon. It's like this conspiracy theories on the left that there's this huge, like this master plan. Everything is part of this master plan.
Project 2025 and yeah.
Yeah. Or yeah, all these things. To answer your question, Leslie, it's an interesting question, but I have a hard time. I have a hard time like actually taking that position, because if the tables were turned, there's so many different variables in play that it wouldn't hit the same way. Now, Biden would not have gotten up. He would not have said, my shoes, wait. They would have carried him like he there's that meme, like Trump versus a bullet, Biden versus stairs, right? Like he would not have had that moment where it breaks through the illusion. My first thoughts, if he would have been hit, is like, oh God, they won. Because just like January 6th, like they are completely going to control the narrative. And it's really hard for me to trust my government right now. For some reason, the shooter of Trump, his face was blown off right away. They can't crack his cell phone. He has no footprint whatsoever. He's a registered Republican. It's like he's perfectly positioned, and we know that the FBI and the CIA go around and do some sort of soft recruiting for they're always manipulating the narrative. We know Patriot Front, all these guys that show up at the right time, like getting out of U-Hauls, doing all this illegal behavior, but they're allowed to do this illegal behavior for optics. It's pure optics, They're obviously feds, but it stirs that kind of narrative. It stirs that on the TDS side or the blue side or whatever that is. It stirs that fear. It keeps people in lock. It's like, well, we cannot let Trump win. Now, why are they so scared of Trump? Why do they want Biden in? And then the whole infrastructure, we know that Biden isn't really in charge of anything. Yeah, like there was a video that came out, like his body is degenerated. He had little Mr. Burns hands.
Like, he's not
we know,
capable.
His wife takes him downstairs, so he's not. So if you turn if there was a hit on that side, if the tables were turned, it's like, well, I know what I'm going to be hearing for the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years. It's like, oh, these terrible fascists, like they try to take out, and like it reifies their whole story that the extremism on the right is the #1 threat to America, which is what the Biden administration has been pushing. And then we know that they are going after Trump. I think that they're now reeling back a lot of the lawfare, saying, "Oh, this is we're not going to persecute him anymore. We're not going to
documents."
They're trying to wash their hands really quick. Whereas if it was the other way around, the system Cthulhu, this huge, ginormous egregore that is the American government, would advance. It can't advance with Trump. It can't advance its control of the narrative with this thing. Trump is again and again and again. He's making it impossible for Cthulhu to.
I'm not so sure if I agree with that. I don't agree. I mean, we saw wrong. What happened during COVID, and we went into the COVID era or period. I did not like Trump. He was, at that point, I was a little orange man bad. I've said before, I don't think I had full TDS because I was invited to the Pussy Hat marches and I didn't really care enough to go to that kind of thing. But I thought he was ridiculous, and I would argue with my mother about it. My mom liked him. And
your mom's based. God bless her soul.
Yeah, she was lovely, but she liked him, and I thought she was just being delusional. And I would have these arguments with her about it, like I'd put down the way his use of vocabulary is really kind of juvenile. I'm replacing now. Everybody does deals. Like, we didn't used to do deals on the national stage. We had more eloquent ways of phrasing things. So I just thought he was kind of a pompous, arrogant, narcissistic, ridiculous figurehead that embarrassed me in terms of, like, these are the people we look up to in our world. This is the authority figures. They look like this. But when we went into COVID and we had Fauci and Birx doing these press conferences, and we heard orders and regulations being proposed, initiated, and executed that had nothing to do with the data that was being gathered and nothing to do with the scientific evidence that we were seeing over here. He was standing there saying, wait a minute, maybe, and he was trying to talk this through. He's trying to be kind of like a reasoning bridge to this, and he's being ridiculed for it. But basically, I saw him standing up, asking questions and really trying to understand, at least in comparison with the other people that were taking that stage at those press conferences. He seemed more authentic and honest with his approach. I still didn't agree with where he went. I didn't like the warp speed vaccine. I didn't like the vaccine at all. But he gained some respect from me for trying to honestly grapple with the thing. But in the end, he didn't slow it down. Even though he had a different approach, he had different thoughts about this, he didn't grind the gears. We saw the system go into full effect. So I guess I don't think that he has the kind of power to gum up the works that some real supporters think that he has. I think the machine marches on.
Yeah, well, it's going to march on, but they overstepped for the lockdowns. Now they're overstepping in all these different ways, and they're causing more and more resistance. They're causing more and more people to gradually wake up. And then as more people get courage, they wake up, and then they eventually have to find the courage to stand up. Right. And I think that as that goes along, I don't know. See, this is where we go back to my conversation, my Yarvinite joking. If we want massive centralization in order to cut the head off of the beast, right? We need to completely, we need a strong man to go into the executive branch and cut apart all of those alphabet agencies. We need to drain.
I don't think that that's a necessary. I don't think that you necessarily
need somebody
have to
with
go that way.
You need a bunch of people and one person with the political will to actually dismantle the system that we have now. And optically, that's what could possibly happen. That's why it's so beautiful, and it's a fantasy. But there's this whole like Augustus, Baron Trump kind of
fan fiction.
Yeah, this fanfic of him like watching what they're doing to his father, and Muad'Dib being it. Because he looks good, he's tall. I've never heard him speak. I don't know if he's eloquent. I don't know if he's got smart, but there's something in his eyes where you're like, it's possible, But you need like a chain of very strong-willed people that are backed by a populist uprising. What Garvin says, it's not a battery, it's a capacitor. You need to build up a ton of political will and then have one democratic moment to reset the system, to shatter the system, and then reset it. Because democracy as a tool of power, it's too chaotic. And that's why we're in the situation we're in now, because the democratic system needs to, the oligarchy has to stir up democratic ill will in order to keep going, which is polarizing us more and more, because we're not actually able to express that political will as a culture or as a people and then let it go. We're just constantly in this swamp of thinking about politics over and over and over again. But if it wasn't such a big deal, we could go back to being boring. It's like, okay, the system's it's reset. It's no longer intruding on me in all these different ways. And it's over there. Yarvin would say, we want a purple emperor. Somebody's not red or blue. He just makes politics uninteresting. He takes politics away from the people because it's poison. And that's why when we talk about like rational centrism in politics, and we're constantly saying this is not the ideal way, this is not the reasonable way to do politics. It's like, no, politics isn't reasonable. Politics is an animal activity because human beings are animals with a little bit of reason, and we're always justifying our animal behavior, our animal passions. So you're not gonna you need to take it out. You just need to offshore it from people, so it's not like feeding on us constantly. But that also requires us to have some discipline in letting it go.
Yeah, I think people would not respond well to that. I think we culturally have to decide we're sick of all this political crap. Like, I don't know how long that'll take, but I just can't see people absorbing the shock of somebody coming in and doing all of that, and then people just like, I don't know. I just can't see the body of people somehow just going, oh, okay, I guess that's not there, and I'm going to move along. Like, I don't know. I don't know if that would happen, or if we need to just all get sick of this ourselves. Not sure. I don't know. It's interesting to think about.
Well,
It is
one more
very
point.
interesting.
Like when Trump stands up and he says, wait, because he's master of optics, master. He's guided by an angel at that moment. He's like, and he raises his fist, says, fight, fight, fight. So what is that? He's summoning this a massive amount of energy that's breaking through the illusion. Where is he going to direct that? Are we going to fight against each other? Are we gonna fight for America? Are we gonna take America back from the people who don't care about America, who are liquidating America, or these globalists, these oligarchs? Like, who are we fighting against? And so I think his pivot's going to be, and we've heard rumors about it, is unity. He's going to try to take that political will, bring everybody together and focus that against the enemies of the people, which is the press. I would agree with that. And I think it would be these unaccountable bureaucratic agencies.
What do you guys think of what do you guys think about how the mainstream media has handled this assassination attempt? Because it seems to me they're playing it down so much.
Right afterwards, they sure did. I haven't followed what they're saying now.
Afterwards, Secret Service, CNN headline said, Secret Service rushes Trump off stage after he falls.
Yeah.
Loud sounds heard.
At
Trump
a rally.
rushed off stage.
Right. Yeah. The Washington Post said something about loud noise. I mean, Trump taken away after loud noises at rally. I don't believe for an instant, if the shoe were on the other foot and Biden was unfortunate enough to be shot, that they would have initially downplayed that. I think it would have been, I mean, they would have seized upon it and they would have been like, you know, these are the sounds of democracy dying. And I mean, it would have been so played up to the point that people would have been in a complete and utter panic.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't see how people aren't disturbed by whatever, you know, whoever you're going to vote for. I think it benefits everybody to have media report things accurately, to give all the information, and to allow people with the facts to make up their own minds. And the fact that there is such an effort to control public opinion and control what we're allowed to know, I find so disturbing and really just disgusting. And I'm surprised that more people aren't really pissed off about it. I mean, who wants to be lied to and controlled?
I'd love to know the graph of the increasing traffic to X, because I mean, that's where I went to just watch. Because even if somebody has something wrong, like within a few minutes, there's a correction. Oh, okay, we know this. Oh, he's not that, blah, blah.
Right.
You know? And so I went into all the spaces, like Mario's space or whatever, the X spaces, to just, even if people, I mean, Alex Jones was in one, and I mean, people are just saying all sorts of stuff. But I was like, I just want to see what everybody's saying on all these different things, and then just watch it evolve there. So I didn't even look at any newspapers or anything like
No.
But I bet the volume has just been going like this for things like.
Yeah, I was kind of expecting it to stutter or even to crash, and it held up. So I wonder if there was a peak, spike in traffic or not. But you take these things for granted. I remember back in my day, in the early days of the internet, when Michael Jackson died, like he broke Google, back in the day. You could break the internet. And then Kim Kardashian comes around and tries to do it too.
Yeah, let's see. There was a couple of chats that I wanted to read. N says, can we please talk about how his parents, I think she's talking about the shooter here, were licensed counselors. We need a separate video on this because it has to be related to who he is and how he became. That's interesting. I guess maybe we can talk about that more as things unfold, because I did see that reported, and that is very interesting for sure.
Having therapists as parents leads to becoming an assassin. Right.
Yeah. That's interesting. Beachy Cogito says they used eloquence in their corruption, talking about politicians. And this was when I was talking about my reaction to Trump being kind of rough speaking and all that. Coffee Fine also says, does eloquence get the job done, or is it just giving the illusion for the elitists?
Well, that goes
And, you know, and
what
then
I was
somebody
saying
else,
yesterday about kayfabe.
yeah, well, Andrew Joyner says Trump is a wrecking ball against political correctness. And I think this is interesting because, yeah, he is. And it is nice to have someone who, in a way, someone who disregards those kind of social scripts and you know, we were talking yesterday about that too, Benjamin, about some of the breakdown in formality and politeness, those social scripts, and how they do indicate respect. They do grease our wheels and make us connect with each other better and help us to communicate with each other better. So if you lose them, if you lose the formality in language, you really do lose a lot. And so people who watch someone who can be really brash and really insulting to people can kind of mourn for a cultural sense of formality and respect. But also, I mean, maybe another side of that coin is going too far into political correctness, because now you're worried about everything you say and how it's going to impact other people, and you feel like you're self-censoring. So it's much different than just please and thank you and yes ma'am and no sir. But we're all the way over to, you know, the kinds of things that I'll talk about and the words that I'll say I'll go through linguistic gymnastics in order to avoid hurting you. So we've got Trump who kind of breaks through one of those walls, but he also breaks through the other.
What other one?
Like he breaks through the formality, but he also breaks through the political correctness. So just going back into his.
Well, I think that's one, his brash way of speaking that he used in 2016 and 2020. And I was reading a thread earlier about somebody like critiquing how he's acting now. It seems like they said he's acting less like a businessman and more like a politician, like where he's understanding that he's in relationship to other people, rather than that's this moment. Like and so you don't know if he's lying or not, but when he's in these interviews that are trickling out now, his thoughts were on the people. He wanted to make sure that his people, his supporters were okay and that they wouldn't panic and that they would know that. He was thinking of them, and I think he was thinking, you know, not just of them, but I think he's developed more of a relationship. I think he's matured in a way, and I think that in his earlier styles of address and action really ticked off and made a lot of pearl clutching. So it broke through the political correctness for some people, but it made, I'm thinking of the proper older women, it made them like, oh no, we can't have this. Like, this is the loss of.
And not just women, but people who have been comporting themselves with this sense of respect and formality and politeness with other people.
Yeah.
And then he comes in talking like reality TV, and it's like, oh, this is gauche. But can we talk about one other thing too related to this? One of the biggest things that I see coming out of the post-assassination attempt discourse on Twitter is the discussion around whether women should be bodyguards. And that's interesting. I mean, you can see the polarization around that. There are some nuanced conversations around that, but a lot of really like, get women out of this, and then women saying, you know, responding to that. You know, you see the two sides of that as well. So what are y'all's thoughts on this?
Oh, and the DEI aspect, like even I just saw before coming on, Chris Rufo has a piece, you know, about that. So that was floating around in the X ether.
I made a joke the night before, like it erupted, DEI women in Secret Service discourse erupted, where I just cropped that iconic image and there was just this woman pushing Trump. I'm like, is this a DEI hire? Because there's a lot of like jokes about this is a DEI hire, this is not a DEI hire. And it was just kind of a joke about like, and I wasn't coming down one way or another. Because that's always the discourse that erupts, and then it erupted, but I deleted it because I thought people would take it the wrong way that I'm calling her a DEI hire. But it turns out that more likely than not, like the head of the Secret Service who came in under Biden, her goal was to put at least 30% women or something like that. She was actively pushing for women to be there, and then you have a lot of little snaky little wondery things about Jill Biden having an event at the same time and pulling off people, and then Trump's people asking for more help and being denied, which is also being denied. So there's a lot of fog of war here. But there is video of this woman who looks kind of a little schlubby, just a little bit, but she's got padding on and stuff. She's on Trump. They're getting him into the motorcade, and she can't find where to put her gun. She's fumbling with her gun. So it's obviously like, oh man, this is bad optics for her, but it's bad optics for the SS. Like, you can't even put your holster back. You're panicking. Like, I don't think it's good for people of that who act that way under that kind of fire to be in that position, because that would lead to bad things if harm happens. So
isn't it crazy that there would be quotas in that kind of hiring? I mean, that seems like a place for merit-based hiring, if I've ever heard of one. Like,
if it's not going to be in the Supreme Court, why would we expect it to be in the Secret Service?
I guess. I mean, this is just, I mean, I wouldn't be supportive of anybody saying we should not hire women for these jobs. Just an outright ban on that. I would say that we need to hire the qualified people. And if none of those end up being women, well, then that's how the cookie crumbles.
I 100% agree. And I think it should be like that basically across the board. It's who's qualified, because there are always outliers, and I don't think you want to prevent somebody from using their skills and talents on the basis of the sex. But I mean, the reality is men are just physically stronger than women, period, like it or not. And I can just ask myself, would I rather have a female bodyguard or a male bodyguard? And my answer is a male bodyguard, in part because if I were to be threatened by another male, the mere presence of a male bodyguard is much more sobering to them than the presence of a female bodyguard. And I saw this when I worked at a psychiatric hospital, where we frequently had to do a show of force or sometimes have physical intervention. And there was a particular nurse who was male, who was very tall and, a decent sized build. And sometimes all he had to do was appear on the scene, and the person would just sort of go and deflate and calm down, because they thought they could just assess immediately, like, I can't pit myself against this guy. But then you could have several teeny little petite women show up, and that person really knows that they can throw their weight around and act out, and potentially people can get injured. So I think there's a real value to male size and strength in dangerous situations. Sorry for the doggies.
Yeah, I don't even know in terms of, the reflex, the twitch muscles. I'm not sure, like, do men have faster reflexes? They might or might not. I don't know. I don't know if there's these different bell curves, but I mean, just simply having to pull a weapon or whatever. I don't know if those are
one of the very few, data concretized differences between the male and the female brain is that males are much better at rotating objects in 3D space.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Spatial.
100%. 100%. Yeah, I've read those studies, and also I've seen it. It is absolutely. And again, there's outliers. So that's why I agree.
But you're not going to get a Brianna
said.
of Tar, like some fictional woman warrior,
Okay.
Oh, it's Game of Thrones. She was like a super tall woman,
Right.
But even if one problem is, like, 5'3" with a fupa kind of memes about this poor Secret Service agent.
He's talking about, did you guys see the goofy video with the women in their office who are doing a little dance, and they're all saying like their identity characteristics? Yeah. They're like,
Gen Z boss with the mini. You haven't seen that, you're already cringing.
It's that's a whole nother topic, because it's interesting to watch how people respond to that. But it's like a little cosmetics company that's women owned, and it's a small company, and they put up this TikTok video where each woman goes around and they're doing this little dance. It's probably like some kind of getting jazzed up for something. It's kind of cute, but it's real cringe if you're outside of it. It was probably cute for the people who are doing it, but they're like Gen Z boss in a mini, and she shows her skirt, and then the next girl says, itty bitty titties and a bob, itty bitty titties and a bob. So, and they go around, I know, but they go around and they each have their little thing, and if you are, so you can imagine how scathing some of the commentary is on this, how ridiculous people think they are. But also there's the defenders who are like, come on, leave them alone. They're doing their little thing. It's stupid, but it's probably like a you had to be there thing, right? Like, yeah.
I get that. And I'm all for acting stupid with your friends. I praise foolishness with friends. However, posting something like that, especially in conjunction with a workplace, I think, how the hell are we ever going to be taken seriously?
Well, and is it women or is it a generation?
I just don't appreciate it.
Yeah, maybe.
No, I think it's women. What about that thing? This made a big to do years ago. You know that show? Oh God, I can't remember what it was called. The one with Kathy Griffin and what's her name? Hoda Khattab or whatever. And they were running around in circles, smacking each other on the butt and being all cute about it. And I just,
that's ridiculous.
No, guys aren't doing that. Like, like why do we have to always, and even just like when you're selling clothes, they always have the woman in some really stupid like position, just acting the fool.
But honestly, isn't there a male version of that? Isn't there a male
Andrew
analog
Tate
to that? Well, not just Andrew Tate, but just like guys doing goofy stuff. Like how many Instagram reels do you see of guys just like doing goofy stunts and whatever?
Yeah, definitely goofy stunts, but not kind of submissive dingbat little sex kitten stunts.
Yeah.
If there are any, please send them to me. I could use that entertainment right about now.
Well, what was why did we bring that up? I can't remember. What were we segueing
because
into?
I was saying 5'3" and a fupa, it's just terrible optics. And there's this concept. And again, like the right wing has some wedge issues. And if anybody's interested in my content, I interview Isaac Simpson, who's a kind of right wing advertising guy. And we talk a lot about the problems in the dissident right wing. And one issue is the Jewish question. They just keep on running up against this, and it turns out that there's a lot of Jews in the right wing, so they don't know. There's race questions. Then there's this woman question that keeps on proposing itself. Like, what do we do with women? What do we do with the longhouse? And the lower end of that discourse, sorry if this
you just offended anybody. Like everybody, race, women, Jews, just
and then
offend them all.
the TQ, the trans question, right? There's these, and then people have, the libertarians are like, well, an adult can do whatever they want, but the more conservatives like, no, we have sex roles for a reason, and then what do we do with women? And there's this concept of there's low grade ways of talking about that red pill stuff, men going their own way, like a lot of vilification of women, making fun of them, saying you belong in the kitchen kind of stuff, and the same thing. And it's the same, and it's replicated on the race thing, like ethno-nationalism. It's just like a very low, well, it's a very extreme position, let's just say, on that. But when you have, this photo, I'm looking at this poor Secret Service woman who can't get her gun into her holster, and she's looking really fat, and her body's just a blob because she's got all this thing on, and you're like, and she's too short. She's shorter than the president too, so she couldn't even catch the bullet. She's really
short.
Yeah. So it's like, well, how do we get in a position where that is the case? And where it's kind of the longhouse, where that's a bodyguard, and it's the longhouse. It's affirmative action. The woman's like, I want equity in hiring, especially with women. We have her on video saying that, and it's like this drive, which is tied to all of the extremes on the other end of like, we're going to equitize things because there's no difference between a man and a woman, and God, save you if you think that that's the case. So it requires people saying, you know what? There's a post right here. Women should never be in the military. Women should never be bodyguards. Women should not be a part of it. Let's return this. Let's return to sex segregated spaces, and to go to, was it? I'm sorry, Jen or Deborah were saying, like, when you're in danger, you want a man next to you. And this moment that happened this weekend, it's reality exerting itself. It's like, this is violence, pure violence, exerts itself onto the political stage. It breaks through all reams and reams of politeness and civilization. And how do we respond to that? One, Trump takes this really beautiful stand. I think he says, no, we're going to fight. And then you see, well, what is his detail? Are they able of doing this? Is it when the tiger's coming at you, is it the woman's job to hold the spear, or is it the woman's job to, Helm's Deep it with the children and the old frail dudes, right? And you're like, well, when reality exerts itself, when the orcs are at the gate, maybe we can return to some sort of gender parity it's inexact, and it stifles some women and it stifles some men, more effeminate men. The GNC people get run over by this, but in certain situations, we cannot afford to accommodate to accommodate.
I think
Get the
your point,
penises out of the
Benjamin,
women's sports and get the vaginas out of the Secret Service detail. It's pretty simple. It might be backwards, but it might be what gets us forwards. Sorry,
well, in the
Deborah.
name of equity, let's let one of the ladies have a say. So,
Okay,
Deborah,
I'm done. I'm
just
zipping it up.
kidding.
it's sort of what you're saying, Benjamin. I was going to say it again or a different way. So many things are becoming apparent with our own eyes. And it's like either you see, we're seeing Biden, you see he can't function. You're seeing this woman Secret Service person who's clearly not able to do her job. Like that, so these veils are just maybe because the plus and minus of everything is visible all the time. There's just too many things happening that are just like obviously showing the downsides of a lot of the policies and views that might be being espoused on the left. It's just sort of like blatant. I wasn't really aspiring to be in the Secret Service, so I'm okay with.
No, you don't feel like
being a spy. Maybe that might be fun, but.
Yeah, it's a lot to chew on. It really is. There's so many. You start to treat people as interchangeable, and identity as these blocks that need to be balanced out. And you end up with the reality that people are not really interchangeable. We're very different. We have different capabilities.
And there are time for kings.
I don't know about all this.
There's time. There's a time. It's coming.
I just don't know if I'm on board with let's fight centralization with more centralization, and let's give one person even more power because we'll get the right person, and then he's sure to divvy our shares out to us, right?
I know, like the longhouse, the oligarchy. This is what you got. You have democracy, you have oligarchy, or you have monarchy.
I don't know. I think you could have decentralization, and maybe we could go from there.
Maybe.
Anyway, thank you all for joining us today for this conversation. Thank you, Benjamin, for sharing your time with us.
Great to see you all.
And very nice seeing you.
Yeah. Thanks, Deborah and Jennifer. We'll see you guys next Monday. I don't know who we've got with us next Monday, but it should be an interesting conversation. I hope you all have a great week.